Hello, everybody. Me here. How y'all doing? All right, so I'm back again to read from the last Freak Show, Book 1, Flame and Fortune, by my new pen name, S.E. Johnson. If you want to grab a copy of the book, links are down there in the doobly-doo. You can get a signed copy from me. You can get the ebook or the paperback edition. It won't have this weird line on it. Don't worry. You can get all that. You can get ebook or paperback copy on Amazon, or you can buy a signed copy directly from me. For those of you waiting on your copy of the book, I ran out of mailers, so I could only send out about half of the orders that I got the time before last. Mailers got here today, so they will be going out tomorrow. Okay? So we finished up chapter 1 last week. This week, we are starting chapter 2. It should be 2 episodes, I would think, because it's around the same length as the first chapter. Anyways, we left off with Father Time leaving to go catch a train and a lady along with it. I'm going to move this over here. I have my heater on, so if you hear that in the background, I apologize. But it's cold. It's cold. All right. Here we are, chapter 2. If you're following along at home, it is page 89. Tell her to find me an acre of land, a sprinkling of leaves, parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme. Washes the grave with silvery tears. Between the salt water and the sea strands, and polishes a gun. Then she'll be a true lover of mine. Arthur Garfunkel and Paul Simon, Scarborough Fair. Chapter 2, Nature and Nurture. The Cortez family carnival traveled by train, and only by train. A train that had been in the family for as long as Mother Nurture could remember. The engine had been replaced on 3 occasions thus far, and 2 of those engine swaps had been within her lifetime. The train consisted of 17 cars in all, an engine and a caboose, the caboose doubling as the ringmaster's cabin car, the greenhouse car, 3 sleeping cars for the employees, Mother Nurture's private cabin car, a kitchen car, and 9 carrier cars for the animals, the big top, and construction materials. The various animals themselves took up 8 of those 9 cars. Rodrigo the elephant, Uncle Jaime's big top familiar, according to the ringmaster himself, had his very own car all to his lonesome. All the animal cars were enclosed nowadays, but that had not always been the case. Used to be, the animal cars had bars so that everyone watching the train pass could witness the varied creatures as they rolled through town. But after an incident in 1910, when Johnson Johnson, a double surnamed alcoholic with a weak bladder, urinated on one of the tigers during a routine maintenance stop, the decision had been made to wall in the cars. It only takes one bad apple, as the saying goes. The lives of circus folk didn't vary much from the lives of long-haul fishermen. The employees worked while the circus was in town and rested while they traveled to the next destination. No one interrupted downtime, lest they suffer Uncle Jaime's wrath. Between locations, Mother Nurture would read and take care of the greenhouse car. Her private cabin doubled as a library, having more shelving for books than any other furniture. Each shelf immaculately kept, different-sized volumes lending a painted mountain range aesthetic to the rows. She had it all: fiction, non-fiction, educational materials ranging from how to grow your own garden to the most current medical texts, you name it, all arranged in alphabetical order by author, because Carmen Lucrecia Cortez, known to everyone she lived and worked with as Mother Nurture, wasn't a monster. This morning, she was reading The Wizard of Oz by Frank L. Baum as they rolled through empty countryside on their way to Mooseville, Texas, a place more than 2,000 miles from any living moose. The landscape outside her window, varying shades of speed-blown brown, as exciting to look at as drying mud, and especially banal for her, seeing as how she'd ridden through this part of the country more than 100 times in her life. Yet, although she didn't read Baum's book a dozen times, her enjoyment of the short novel never waned. She reached the part where Dorothy defeats the Wicked Witch of the West when someone knocked on her cabin door. Seeing as how the knock had come from the rear, and hers was a second car from the caboose, with only the greenhouse between her cabin and Uncle Jaime's, her visitor could only be one person. She stuck a ticket stub into her current location in the book, closed it, and laid it on her reading table, next to the stained glass lamp by which she did her daily reading. She rose easily from her purple crushed velvet chair and answered the door. Even unsmiling, Uncle Jaime looked better than he had in weeks. The last stop had been taxing enough on him, but add in one of the gorillas, a male named Chuko, not wanting to go back to his car and travel to yet another location in less than 4 days, and the man was at his wits' end. But now he had a night's sleep under his belt and seemed better off by a mile. His black hair, perpetually slicked back and kept that way by an egg white and vinegar concoction he used 3 times a day, ran linearly away from his scalp, fleeing toward his nape, and one could, if one chose, count each individual row by his wide-toothed comb, bringing to Mother Nature's mind someone dragging a pitchfork through obsidian sand to reveal lines of pale beach sand underneath. His eyes, which were brown bordering on black and usually cloaked in the shadow of his ringmaster's top hat, trended hazel today. In Mother Nature's experience, the color of Uncle Jaime's eyes changed with his mood. The lighter they were, the better he was feeling. If you couldn't differentiate between the pupil and the iris, it was best you gave the ringmaster his space. Today, he wore a plain white t-shirt tucked into a pair of black slacks held up by red suspenders stained yellow in a dime-sized spot near his left nipple by mustard. His feet were bare, he said, because it reminded him of being a kid, something about professionalism being the only real need for footwear. It should be known that all dialogue between Jaime Luis Cortez, hitherto referred to as Uncle Jaime, and his niece Carmen Lucrecia Cortez, hitherto referred to as Mother Nuture, originates in Spanish, the language of their native land, Honduras. The two rarely speak English in private conversation, unless there is a third party involved who they respect enough to bless with translation. In public, they speak nothing but American English and lean heavily on their accents, which are otherwise too subtle to catch west of Houston, Texas. East of Houston, Texas was another thing entirely. We will translate here for those of you who do not speak Spanish, but allow us to assure you that when spoken, written, or read, Spanish is a lovely language that nearly sings. It's so beautiful. It is the bane of every author's existence to describe the musicality of language, so we will not be putting on airs here. Uncle Jaime brushed past Mother Nuture, leaving her to close the door behind him. You smoked with that white man? Yes, I did. You have issue with that? You know your plant is not for just anyone. He turned quickly on his heel and began pacing the width of the cabin. He was not just anyone, she said, stoic yet uncertain, unsure where this conversation would lead and wanting to keep her emotions in check until she could assess the situation. The plants were hers, no one else's, and Uncle Jaime had never challenged her when it came to them. Then again, she'd never smoked with anyone outside of their family before yesterday. This was all new territory for her. What makes this one so special? The ringmaster said. Who said he was special? She shot back, hands on her hips, trying to keep her audacity within reasonable limits and failing. You smoked with him. You never smoked with any of the others. She held up a hand, palm to her, the back facing Uncle Jaime, and rolled her fingers inward. Out with it. Are you angry with me? Uncle Jaime stopped pacing, met her eyes. No, I could never be angry at you. I'm just procrastinating. I have something else to tell you. Well, that explained it. Her stance softened, shoulders relaxing, neck drooping, fists falling from her hips to her sides, hands flowering into individual fingers instead of balled weapons. Then, what is it? Uncle Jaime stepped to the long picture window, the only wall space not covered in books, and watched the banal brown world blur by, digging his toes into the soft green carpet that covered the floor of her cabin. Uncle Jaime did this when he was nervous, she knew, and seeing him in this state when she'd previously thought he'd been looking better for wear caused her to pause. Is everything okay? She asked, suddenly scared to find out what had occurred to put her uncle in such a mood. It's... Uncle Jaime ran a hand through his egg-white lacquered hair. This, whatever this was bad. Her uncle never risked messing up his hair. Out with it, she barked. So much for keeping her emotions in check. Her uncle craned his head in her direction, but didn't meet her eyes. It's Chuco. Uncle Jaime took a long, measured breath, then loosed it in one extended, purse-lipped exhale. Mother, I don't think he has long. All right. We are currently reading from The Last Freak Show, Book 1, Flame and Fortune, by my new pen name, S.E. Johnson. If you want to read the book yourself, links are down there in the doobly-doo. You can get a signed copy from me, or you can grab a copy from Amazon, ebook or paperback. What's up? I'm here, got here late, so I'm going to the beginning. Gotcha. All right. And hello, Lazy. How dost thou do? I'm going to get back to reading. But yeah, y'all can buy this. You're watching live or if you're watching the VOD, either way, it's available down there in the doobly-doo. Two. Chuco was a 50-year-old silverback gorilla whose fur had grayed completely at this point in his life, the hair on his back having slowly taken over the rest of him, like a symbiotic fungus. The old guy sat in the corner of his cage, and it was immediately obvious that he was having trouble taking his next breath. Every inhalation shuddered through him, as if he were being slowly electrocuted. A dangling thread of drool, thin and milky, descended from his bottom lip to pool on one hairless pectoral, the strand trembling under every labored rise and fall of his chest, like spider silk in a brisk breeze. Oh, Chuco mio, Mother Nuture said as she unlocked the gate and swung it wide, not bothering to close it. Chuco wasn't going anywhere, and now she knew why he'd not wanted to return to his cage after their time at the last stop had come to an end. No living thing wants to die behind bars. Chuco, who'd been named by Mother Nurture's father, had been purchased by her grandfather a few years before his death from a Chinese man who tried and failed to launch his own circus in America. The silverback understood only spoken Mandarin and could only respond in a special form of sign language the previous owner had invented and documented, wonderfully, we might add, which he passed on to Chuco's new owners. Mother Nurture's father had been the only person she'd known who spoke more languages than she did at present. Before his death, Javier Jose Cortez had been fluent in 41 languages and had taught his daughter over half of those, along with having passed down his love for the written word. At present, Mother Nurture had the ability to speak 32 languages fluently, 9 short of her father, and was currently learning 3 more: Swedish, Swahili, and an unnamed language known to a secret village near Tibet that could be written and read, yet should never be spoken aloud. Legend said to speak this language would be to usher the world into darkness for all those who listened. No word on what happened to the speaker after the utterance. She entered Chuko's cage, slowly, approaching him as one might approach a toddler holding a loaded rifle. Although Chuko had only ever been kind in his long years with the circus, he remained a wild animal who was currently on his deathbed. So anything and everything was possible. She moved closer still, and Chuko extended an arm to wave her away, shook his head. I want to help you, Mother Nurture said in perfect Mandarin. Sorry, there should be no accent there. Chuko's arm worked in practiced patterns. He hugged himself, then extended each arm before finally tapping his wrist, meaning, no help, let go, my time. I can make it easier, she said to the great ape. Chuko's brow furrowed in concentration. He crooked a finger into a question mark, meaning, how? Here, Mio. She pulled a lemon cake from her pocket, unrolled the cloth napkin inside which she had stored it, and handed it to Chuko. Here, eat this, for mother. Chuko nodded. She dropped the lemon cake into his massive hand, and he clapped it into his mouth hard enough that his hand, meaning his lips, caused a loud pop that made her cringe. Chew that, she said. Chew good. Chuko's mouth worked in languid, circular motions as he masticated the treat. It would take a while for the drug hidden inside the cake to take effect, and she could only hope that Chuko lasted that long. The last thing she wanted to do was roll a joint and blow smoke in the big guy's face. Chuko hated smoke. His previous owner had said because his parents had died in a deforestation fire. She stayed with him until the marijuana kicked through his defenses. Chuko slid down the wall and closed his eyes. His entire body, which had been rigid and struggling, now pooled into a puddle of silver fur. His breathing slowed, remained shallow. After another moment, Mother Nurture lay down beside him and pulled one of his heavy arms over her, threading her fingers into his. They lay like that, her back to his front, Mother Nurture spending these final minutes with her friend, counting his breaths. Go to sleep, she bade in Mandarin. Go to sleep, King Chuko. Rest now. Rest. Chuko inhaled, long and shuddering, and held that breath for some time. Then finally, death rattled from him in a soft expulsion of foul-smelling air, and he was gone. She stayed there with Chuko until he started to cool where their skin touched. Then she went to find Uncle Jaime to inform him that one of their own had parted ways from them to start his own lonely journey into the mysterious, unknown someplace that existed beyond our world. You're eating an expensive gourmet donut? So good. You know what's even better than an expensive gourmet donut? It's The Last Freak Show, Book 1, Flame and Fortune, by S.E. Johnson. That's me. New pen name. Links are down there in the doobly-doo. Go grab yourself a copy. I can only read so fast. We'll see. 3. Uncle Jaime said nothing when she finished giving him the awful news of Chuko's demise. Mother Nurture stepped up and wrapped her arms around her uncle's slender waist. They held each other and cried silently, each saying their own personal goodbyes to Chuko in their respective heads. He's gone, Uncle Jaime said shakingly into her ear. My baby, my stubborn old baby is gone. Uncle Jaime used the brass horn by his compartment's door to call the engine compartment. He requested Johnny Sandoval, the conductor and concessions manager, to stop the train. Why, boss? Replied Sandoval, his voice robotic through the flared end of the brass communication tube. We're making damn good time. Chuko's gone, Johnny. Park this thing and come say goodbye. After a moment's silence, the train lurched forward, gently, just this side of imperceptibly, as the brakes were applied. Then Johnny Sandoval's tinny voice said, Yes, sir. May God take and keep our buddy Chuko. May he. Yes, Uncle Jaime said, and thumbed a tear from his eye. Two of the most dependable hands their circus employed, a pair of separated conjoined twins named Peter and Marianne Stout, animal trainers by trade, high wire performers by choice, spent the next few hours sewing Chuko into an expensive silk robe, the same robe that had served as Chuko's performance garb these past 4 decades. His funeral shroud in place, Chuko was moved carefully, lovingly, by the tent men the circus employed, each one of them over 300 pounds and 6+ feet tall. You had to be a behemoth of a human being to do the work they did, and it showed clearly in their bulging arms, thick thighs, and barreled chests. 10 in all, 4 men on each side, 1 at each end, shuffled through the car ahead of a procession of circus folk, all tagging along to see old Chuko off. A hole was dug, not for Chuko's burial, but for a bonfire. Uncle Jaime had asked the tent men to retrieve some pallets, on top of which Chuko would be placed with the tenderest of care, out in the middle of western Texas nothingness. He then sent Peter and Marianne back to the train for libations. Uncle Jaime kept a fully stocked liquor cabinet year-round, even now during Prohibition, and Mother Nuture made it no business of her own as to how he had accomplished such a thing. Circus folk allowed each other their personal secrets. Such was their code. The siblings, Peter and Marianne, returned with bottles and cups and change of outfit. The brother and sister still wore their specially tailored 2-body vestments whenever they were feeling down. They said because it made them feel closer, like the old days, before a sketchy Russian had separated them and their teens. Before, they'd been connected at the hip, had shared a kidney. The back alley Russian surgeon who'd completed the procedure had said he'd needed to remove the shared kidney completely, which neither of them had minded, and that same Russian said he'd sell their previously shared organ to a prince in some country he would not name. This was how he'd been able to charge such a small fee for the procedure, he'd said, because he had buyers for spare parts who were no more than a day's flight from him. The Russian surgeon kept carrier pigeons for this reason. This was ages before the first successful legal organ transplant. And this should be stated because some tend to believe that certain medical procedures didn't happen before they were made safe and embraced by society, and that certainly was not the case. Not ever. Gasoline meant to fuel the generators that powered the lights for the circus was then sloshed around, covering the pallets the tent men had stacked 100 yards from the train. Chuko, too, was adequately soaked with the flammable liquid, his robe glistening wetly in the midday sun. Uncle Jaime chose a piece of board that had come unnailed from one of the pallets and used it as a torch, wrapping one end in an old greasy shirt Johnny Sandoval had donated for the occasion, then lighting it with a wooden match from a box of them. At 50 paces, he tossed the torch like a spear into the heart of the vapor cloud and old wood and took several steps back as the fire whooshed to life. The initial heat wave that hit those in attendance brought sweat to more brows than not, as witnessed by the numerous handkerchiefs now making an appearance to mop their respective owners' foreheads. Drinks were poured and raised. Everyone held high their glasses, toasting their fallen friend. Safe travels, my friend, Uncle Jaime called over the spit and crackle of the bonfire. May we meet in another life. Another life! came everyone's response, a single voice made up of a multitude of accents and languages. One could search their entire lives for a more diverse blend of people than circus folk and never find the like. Mother Nurture sat on the rear steps of the caboose, smoking a fresh joint, watching the fire and everyone milling about, some forming groups reflective of their jobs, performers with performers, tent men with tent men, and the smallest group of all, Uncle Jaime, Johnny Sandoval, and Peter and Marianne Stout. Once Mother Nurture was sufficiently numb, she rose from the step and joined her uncle. "Hey, Mother," Johnny Sandoval said from the corner of his mouth that wasn't holding a rolled cigarette. "How you holding up?" "About the same as everyone else," she answered with a shrug. "We were telling stories," said Uncle Jaime. "About Chuco?" she asked. "About Chuco," confirmed Uncle Jaime. "He was a card," Sandoval said, chuckling sadly. The man was thin, with a beer gut peeking from underneath a soot-stained wife-beater. Black hair, curled and kinked, peeked over the inverted dome that was the neck of his dirty shirt. His ratty blue jeans, too, were caked in long streaks of oily brown, where he'd wiped his hands hundreds of times over the years. "Remember when he slung that shit at that kid that was pestering him?" Mother Nurture laughed smallly. No, but that sounds like him." "Wait, what?" asked Peter Stout. The male twin stood an inch shorter than his female doppelganger and maintained a gentleman dandy appearance. His hair perpetually smelled of pomade. Catch Peter Stout on a good day, and you'd have thought him British royalty, although his accent was most decidedly New England in nature. "I haven't heard this one either," said Marianne, the fairer of the Stout twins, in a voice and diction that eerily resembled her brother's own vocal cadence. She was as thin as Peter from the waist up, both siblings' chests flatter than Kansas prairie, but her hips were wide and plenty, and swayed when she walked, like the balls of a perpetual motion machine. Sandoval grinned, obviously happy to tell his tale to anyone who would listen. "Okay, so 3 years or so ago, we were in Alabama. Some cowpoke, some cowpoke town where half the rubes who lived there had family trees that didn't branch. I joked, but I joked, what has 3 teeth and 100 dozen double first cousins? This town is what? Grandparents were siblings. Then they parents were siblings. And we get it, Sandy," Peter said. All right. I'll get on with it. This one here, this little boy, he was standing all bucktooth and inbred right there for Chuco's cage, while his cage were still on the flatbed there. And this kid, he was just a squalling for his mammy, which were most likely his aunt, too, I reckon. "Sandy," Peter warned. "All right, okay, I'll stop beating that bush. Anyway, so this kid, he's screaming a mean one, and Chuco is just minding his own goddamn business, picking at fleas or what have you, when the little boy grabs the bars of Chuco's cage and starts rattling something fierce like." Johnny Sandoval paused here to hawk a black mass into the Texas sand, which was quite the feat, considering the man's cigarette never left the corner of his mouth. "So Chuco stops picking at fleas and just sits there, right there, staring at this kid. I was passing by, doing my rounds of the cars like I does. Maybe I were even looking for this squealing brat's parents. I don't recall properly. Probably because I were 4 shots into this rot gut right here. But I happened to look over at Chuco's cage, and all I see is him staring a bastard at this little boy. Nothing happens. Kid's parents scoop him up and run him inside the tank. Later, Chuco is unloaded and dressed and ready to perform. He swings out into the ring in his silk robe, what we burned him in." Mother Nurture winced. "Sorry, Mother. I have a little more respect. My apologies." "It's okay. Go on, Sandy." "Well, Chuco, he comes out the back into the ring, like I already said, and he starts this thing. He swings around the perimeter like he always done, grunting and hollering at all the rubes, until he comes to a sliding halt right in front of that there little boy I done told you about. I'm in the wings, watching the rubes watch my friend Chuko, when I honed in on what old Chewy were doing. That giant monkey, ape, Marianne corrected. That's what I done said, ape. That giant ape squatted right there for that boy and him parents and took just the meanest hot squat on the straw. A big old sturdy turd that no doubt made his ancestors a mite proud. And the rubes, boy who, they loved that shit. No pun intended. Intended or not, everyone in their little group laughed, even Uncle Jaime, although he tried to hide it with a clenched fist to his lips. Not everyone were laughing. Not everyone were laughing, though. No, sir, no, ma'am. And one lady even blew her supper on a teenager in front of her. Should have seen it. How many of them had missed this was how any of them had missed this was beyond Mother Nurture's comprehension. And she was beginning to believe that Johnny Sandoval was telling another of his tall tales until Peter chimed in with, I remember that now. I brought the whole show to a stop because that kid that got sick on the person beside him. And then that person got sick and right, cried Marianne. I remember that. Everything stopped because everyone started tossing their cookies onto their neighbors. That's the time, all right, said Johnny Sandoval, and even Mother Nurture now recalled that evening with stunning clarity, although she hadn't seen what Johnny testified to next, and neither did anyone else in their immediate circle. Johnny Sandoval clued them in on why that should have been. The reason y'all don't remember the boy is because it happened while everyone were getting sick on one another. But I seen it, and it was goddamn foul, let me tell you. White folks were getting to know what not white folks, while folks were getting to know what each other had for supper. Our boy Chuko dips a fist in that pile of mess he done just laid. Cute as a baby bird, it was, and slings a mighty handful into that there little boy's face. Point blank. Splat! My God, Marianne groaned. You ain't never seen a pair of parents move so goddamn fast in all your days. I swear to God you ain't. Sandoval cackled. They pulled that boy out of there so fast, he left a trail of brown hanging in the air like a streamer. You're disgusting, said Peter Stout. Just plain disgusting. Well, you ain't too bad your own self, Paper. Sandoval clapped Peter on the back roughly with one rough palm. The smaller man staggered forward but managed to stay up. I have a story, said Mother Nurture, and their attention was hers. I am reading from The Last Freak Show, Book 1, Flame and Fortune, by my new pen name, S.E. Johnson. If you want to read it for yourself, you can click the links down there in the doobly-doo. You can get an ebook or a paperback copy through Amazon, or you can buy a signed paperback copy from moi. My throat. Y'all can hear it, can't you? Now I'm talking like Johnny Sandoval. Y'all can hear it, can't you? Ah, that's some good honey lemon tea there, bro. All right, back to it. 4. Chuco was named for the Spanish expression does not work. And for a time, the name fit perfectly. Mother Nurture said because Chuco refused to do anything they asked him, even when the commands were given in Mandarin, his first language. Her father, Javier Jose Cortez, had patience to spare, though. It's how he got his circus name, Dr. Cortez. Wordplay was a family pastime for the Cortezes, and no one passed through their family circus employment ritual without having a new moniker installed, one that would stick with its owner until their employment with the show ended, or their life did. The only member of the circus who hadn't been targeted for name reassignment was Uncle Jaime, likely because he was Javier's brother. Likewise, Johnny Sandoval was known as Sandy to most, and Duck, an odd shortening of the title Conductor, to everyone else. The Stout twins were Pete and Mary to some, but to everyone who knew them well enough to have visited their private train car, called them Paper and Quill. But this isn't the time or place to explain why. The time will come, though, we promise. The story Mother Nurture told her 4 companions that night around the fire began in Slidell, Louisiana, when she was but a girl of 10 years old. Chuko had been recently purchased from that Chinese man, whose name Mother Nurture never did know, for $200, with an extra $150 for the sign language documents. Dr. Cortez spent every waking hour on the road studying the hand-drawn images, some of which were waterlogged or stained yellow and brown with age. Because Mother Nurture wasn't a part of the show as of yet, she'd sit in her father's car, which would be retired after his death and left in the New Mexico wasteland somewhere between two towns known as Las Cruces and Santa Fe, researching the documents, while her father and uncle entertained the masses. You can still find Dr. Javier Jose Cortez's train car if the mood strikes you. The paint is mostly gone, but the D of Doctor and the CO of Cortez can be seen on the right forward panel. The wheels are nothing but rust held together by the memory of iron, and termites have eaten nearly a quarter of the old train car, whose interior furnishings were emptied out and distributed among the Cortez Family Circus's employees on a first-come, first-served basis. A group of hikers stumbled onto Dr. Cortez's old abode in the 1990s and took amateur handheld video camera footage of the corpse they found inside. Javier Jose Cortez, like Chuko, had been given a funeral pyre send-off by friends and family, so the body hadn't been his. The corpse and its lore had been deemed the DCO man in the presses all over New Mexico, Nevada, and even a handful of smaller outlets in West Texas. Hold my voice last. One warm October evening, the humidity in southern Louisiana thicker than pancake batter made with Alabama red clay, Mother Nurture was looking over the sign language documents when she heard shouting somewhere outside. She dropped the thread-bound stack of pages and dashed from her father's cabin and out into chaos. A group of men and women, all people Mother Nurture knew personally, for they were all members of her father's circus, stood in a parabolic arc in front of Chuko's train car. Banging and clanging could be heard above the shouting that had beckoned her from her father's car. "He's going to kill him!" someone screamed. "Somebody help him!" cried another. Mother Nurture, waist high to most in attendance, slithered and shoved through the crowd, making her way to the front. "Hey, grab her!" yet another voice commanded. Mother Nurture ducked out of someone's reaching grasp and finally saw what had caused all the commotion. Her father was inside Chuko's cage, his head pressed between 2 bars, facing the crowd, his face drawn in a rictus of pain, iron poles digging into his cheeks and temples as something pushed from behind, intent on shoving the man's skull through the gap, whether it cracked during the process or not. Mother Nurture dodged another grab from an unseen assailant and bolted around the cage, hopped onto the connecting bolt, and thanks to her slight frame, easily squeezed through a pair of bars. Once inside, she found Chuko standing behind her father, one massive hand on Dr. Cortez's nape, smashing her father's face into and between the iron poles. "Stop!" she screamed, but Chuko either didn't hear her or didn't care to acquiesce to her demands. "Mia, don't," her father groaned. "He'll stop it!" she roared at the gorilla in Mandarin. Chuko didn't let her father go, but he visibly relaxed, his hand no longer actively pressing Dr. Cortez's face into the bars. The gorilla's left hand swung up, patted the ceiling of his cage, and then pointed at her father's back. "You want out?" she said without thinking. Then lower. "Papi, I think he wants out." "I know that, mija. I know. I was just telling the big guy that..." Chuko roared and once more leaned into the back of Dr. Cortez's skull with considerable force. Not at full force, Mother Nurture noticed, because she knew that if the gorilla truly wanted to, he could effortlessly push her father's head through. She could nearly hear his cranium cracking. "Stop it!" she screamed again, fists at her side, trying to intimidate a beast 10 times her size. "Mia," Dr. Cortez moaned. I love you." "No!" Mother Nurture stomped her foot just once, and Chuko reeled back, as if she'd shoved him off her father. The gorilla glared at her, his eyes full of animalistic rage, as her father, who'd been pushing against the iron poles to counteract the gorilla's pressure on his head, fell away from the bars, staggered to the side, and landed on his flank in a pile of urine-soaked straw. Dr. Cortez would smell like Chuco's piss for several days thereafter, even after multiple baths in a solution of pureed tomato and vinegar. Her father crawled to standing, snatched her around the waist, and headed for the gate. All the while, Mother Nurture never lost sight of the gorilla. Chuco's eyes blazed with anger, but he hadn't moved from the corner of his cage, where he'd ended up after her stomp. Once outside, Dr. Cortez passed her off to Uncle Jaime. "Keep her still, if you can," Dr. Cortez told his brother. Then, to Mother Nurture, he said, "Crazy little girl. Don't you leave his side." Dr. Cortez stormed off to his cabin, cursing a blue streak, angrier than his daughter had ever seen him, and disappeared inside. A moment later, he returned, loading a rifle he sometimes used to hunt game during the circus's off-season. He approached the cage, threw the bolt on the gun, and aimed at Chuco. "I'll show you, you son of a—" "Daddy! Daddy, no!" Mother Nurture begged. Her father's index finger blanched against the rifle's trigger. He fully intended to shoot Chuco. Her kind and patient father, who only hunted when food was needed and always used every piece of the animal, was going to kill something in cold blood. She never once considered that Chuco might deserve to be shot. He had, after all, almost crushed her father's head between those bars, but something said all of this was wrong. Her father was no longer in danger, so why kill the animal? None of it made sense to her. "Daddy," she said, sobbing, starter tears turning to torrents. "Daddy, please." Dr. Cortez glanced at his daughter, then back to Chuco before reverting his gaze to his daughter. Before reverting his gaze to his daughter. "He was going to kill me," her father said in a tortured voice. She could see in his eyes that he didn't want to kill Chuco, that he felt his hand had been forced onto this rifle he now had trained on the great ape. "He didn't mean it," she said, and although she had no way of knowing for sure if she was right, that this had all been some horrible misunderstanding, she felt certain she was correct in her assumption. "I can't have a dangerous animal as part of the circus, Mia, no matter how much he cost us. I'm sorry." Dr. Cortez aimed down the sights, training the barrel on Chuco. "Let me talk to him, please, papi." "He only speaks." Dr. Cortez paused, his face crinkled in confusion. "You spoke Mandarin. Iner, to him." He finally managed. "How?" "I read what you read. I listen to you talk. After a while, it just makes sense. But I can talk to him. You heard me." I I did. I did hear you." Dr. Cortez chuckled. "Okay," he said, lowering the rifle. "You'll talk to him. But from out here, you don't go into the cage, understood?" Sí, gracias, papi." Mother Nurture stepped up to the bars. Her father started to reach for her, but she waved him off. "I'm not going any closer," she said. Then she spoke to Chuco in Mandarin, a language she hadn't studied in full and was nowhere near fluent in, not yet, but to hear her would have made anyone think it was her native language. We will, of course, translate here. Why do you want out? She asked of the angered gorilla. I want out, Chuko repeated by tapping the roof of his cage and pointing at the gathered crowd, who had fallen silent as the spectacle continued. But why? Do you want to go somewhere? Chuko shook his head, tapped the ceiling of the car, then grabbed a bar in each fist, rattling them, his head continuing back and forth, meaning, no, want out, cage no good. He doesn't like his cage, she told her father. Dr. Cortez, who'd been listening with something akin to awe, nodded, said, Tell him we have nowhere else for him. She did. Want home, Chuko said by miming the shape of a house over his head with his arms, steepling his hands. He says he wants to go home, said Mother Nuture to her father. This is his home. Tell him that. You are welcome here to live, Mother Nuture said to Chuko. We want you here. Chuko made as if he were cradling a baby, then tapped his chest with one hand and grabbed his penis with the other, ending it all with a shrug, meaning, Where is Dad? She said, He wants to know where his father is. Dr. Cortez thought about this for a moment before replying. His face contorted as he struggled with something unsaid, and Mother Nuture had to prod gently to get it out of him. Be honest, Papi, she advised. Dr. Cortez took a deep breath, said, I would break his heart, I think, mija, if I am honest. You always tell me that a hard truth should always be given instead of a kind lie. Dr. Cortez's smile shone with pride. Yes, mija, I do say that, don't I? Okay, then. You tell him his father was sick. He couldn't care for him anymore. So he sold. No, don't tell him he was sold. We adopted him. But that's not true, is it? She asked. Yes, mija. In a way, it is true. He was adopted. The money wasn't important. Only he was. Why? Mother Nuture asked, more for her own curiosity's sake than anything else. Because I saw something in him. He's so smart, like you, mija. So very, very smart. Mother Nuture blushed under the compliment. She considered exactly how to relay all this to Chuko, who was, at this time, not yet known by his name, then spoke in a measured, assured cadence. Your father was sick. We adopted you because you are so smart. We want you to stay with us, and we promise, swear, that we will do everything we can to make you happy. While she spoke, Dr. Cortez nodded silently. What's she saying? Said a voice from the other side of Chuko's car. Shh! Hissed someone else. Chuko listened, then grabbed his tummy and crotch and pulled a face, meaning, Father's sick? Yes, I'm sorry. He didn't want you to see him in pain, so we adopted you. Chuko's head drooped, and he stared at the floor for some time before finally sliding down the wall to sit in the corner of his compartment. Thinking she was done here, she turned to her father, but Dr. Cortez continued to watch the cage. Following his line of sight, she looked back and caught the tail end of something Chuko was saying. What did you say? She asked. Chuko rolled his upper lip into something that resembled a grin. His hands flapped in intricate patterns, and Mother Nuture caught only every other meaning, but it was enough. She turned back to her father, said, He wants a new cage. This one is too big. I think that's what he said. Something about being lonely in all that space. Well, I will be damned, muttered Uncle Jaime from her father's side. He wants a smaller cage? Her father asked incredulously. To Chuko, Mother Nuture said, Can you repeat what you said Slower this time? Chuko scratched at his temple, nodded, and signed at half the speed he had previously. Mother Nurture listened, watched, intently, reading every lavish hand gesture, until she thought she had his response locked down. What did he say? Uncle Jaime, always the impatient one of the two brothers, asked. His father, I'm guessing he's the man you brought him from, used to sleep with him in his cage. They were intimate? I think that's the right word. Uncle Jaime stared for a second before exploding into guffaws. Her father, on the other hand, didn't find the revelation funny at all. Dr. Cortez seemed to choose his words carefully before continuing. He was intimate with the man I got him from. Yeah, Mother Nurture said, shrugging. Whatever that means. We are reading from The Last Freak Show, Book 1, Flame and Fortune by my new pen name, S.E. Johnson. Currently on Chapter 2, 106 pages in. We are at Subchapter 5. So I'm going to read one more subchapter, and then I'm going to go ahead and take my break. And try and see if I can get my throat and my voice to act right. One more subchapter, then break time. 5. You're pulling my goddamn leg, Johnny Sandoval roared with laughter. That Chinaman were giving the old long and strong to your buddy Chuko? God damn! Uncle Jaime nodded. She's telling the truth. I was there. It happened just like Mother said. Jesus wept. Can you imagine? Wonder which one of them was the woman in the relationship. Think that Chinaman put it in? Or was he taking it? Quit it, Sandy, Marianne chided. Chuko obviously loved the man. I would guess so, shit. Sandoval, bent in half with laughter, slapped at his knees. Now I done heard it all. For Christ and judgment, I done heard everything there is to hear. They stayed in that lonesome desert nothingness, remembering and honoring Chuko, until the fire burned out and every member of the circus, from ringmaster to tent men, were solidly drunk. The only person who hadn't partaken in the evening's drinking was Mother Nurture, but even her mind was foggy with weed smoke by night's end. They were behind schedule by 6 hours, but these things happened. Tragedy wasn't predictable. Such is the nature of loss. The best laid plans of mice and men, and all that. I'm just glad I ain't gotta make no runs between here and the next stop, by God. Johnny Sandoval slurred as he headed, alone, toward the train engine he called home. God's gifts are plentiful, Uncle Jaime said, his own words tilted into italics. Let's get you back to the car, Mother Nurture said. She snaked an arm around her uncle's waist and led the inebriated man to his caboose, where she tucked him in. Before leaving, she called Sandoval over the horn. Sandy, you woke? Don't need to be woke to drive this thing, came Sandoval's tinny, drunken response. Can drive this here beautiful best beastie. You can drive this here beautiful beastie in my sleep. But I'm all ears, pretty lady. What you need? Take it slow, Johnny. I told you I'm all right. Don't take that tone with me, Duck, she barked back. Yes, I'm sorry about that. She could almost see the tail between Sandoval's legs. If you had let me finish, please, he said in a meek voice that was only made meeker by the yards of train between him and her. Thank you. Take it slow. Uncle Jaime will be down for some time. She yawned, the weed in her system welcoming in the Sandman and his magic dust. We should be in Mooseville in less than 3 hours, right? 3 or 4. As long as we ain't got no more stops, yes'm. You think we're all gonna sleep this off in 3 to 4 hours, Sandy? Silence. Then, no, ma'am. Especially not me. I'll take her slow. Thanks you, Sandy. No, thank you, miss. And my apologies for being, you know, short with you. My Irish gets up when I'm in my cups. Hey, that's a mite poetic. Apology accepted. Eyes open and forward now. Yes'm. Mother Nurture made it back to her cabin and into bed before the train lurched once, twice, and then a third time as it settled into a hypnotizing, swaying rhythm, effectively rocking her into dreamland. She dreamed of Chuko and how he used to love tearing apart and devouring oranges while she or Marianne read to him. He'd been a conscientious listener and a huge fan of the works of Edgar Allan Poe. Aside from that mess about the life of Arthur Gordon Pym, no one she'd ever met liked that one. It had no ending to speak of. Chuko adored the fall of the House of Usher, but would have taken the Raven in a pinch. She read to the slumbering gorilla, and her lucid dream became the narrative, painting dark landscapes and shadowy homes, creeping murderers and pearl-clutching maidens, until all melted away, and she slept dreamlessly. Her only company, the sway of her cabin car and the steady grind of the wheels on the track. The train arrived in Mooseville with little fanfare, which meant nothing good for tomorrow's opening. If no one was chasing down the train as it rode through town, that usually meant there was a problem. Some other event taking place at the same time, perhaps, or maybe, and this idea terrified her, no one had the money to attend the circus in the first place, so no one had felt the need to ride out to meet them. Income might be light and profits non existent, which was becoming the rule instead of the exception lately. Yet she sat at the window, counting the cars that had shown up, four in all, when in previous years dozens had come out to welcome them. No matter what, though, the show must go on. So she waved, her wrist politician stiff, saying hello to those handful of spectators, hoping they all planned on bringing with them each a small army of folks who simply hadn't been able to attend the circus's arrival. The answer to all of Mother Nature's assumptions and questions were answered a few moments later when the train inched to a halt alongside the stop's setup location. No wonder so few people had come out to watch the train as it rolled through town. All the townsfolk were here, possibly the entire population of Mooseville, and, Mother Nurture noted with some concern, not a one of them were happy to see them arrive. Well, I'm going to take my break. 10, 15 minutes, and then I'll be back. If you're just joining us, I'm reading from The Last Freak Show, Book 1, Flame and Fortune, from my new pen name, S.E. Johnson. If you want to buy the book and read it for yourself, links are down there in the doobly-doo. You can get a paperback or an ebook off of Amazon, or you can get a signed copy from me. If you're international at all, yes, even Canada and Mexico, and you order the UK one, that's $100. Don't worry, whatever shipping I don't use, I will refund to you as soon as I print the label. So I'm going to go ahead and take my break. See y'all in about 15 minutes. All right. Okay. Mute. Okay, I have returned. I'm gonna keep going for as long as uh, my voice allows. There we go. All right. We are picking up on the bottom of page 108, subchapter 6. 6. Signs, signs, everywhere were signs. Cardboard with black paint font. No undesirables. Heathens be gone. You're not wanted here. All that is misspelled, by the way. Seems like a bright bunch. Uncle Jaime sighed as he entered her car, rubbing sleep from his eyes. His face remained placid, but Mother Nurture could see the elevated pulse brought on by hangover pounding in his neck. Suppose I should go out and meet whoever's leading this charge. Make rounds and tell everyone we might have to move on, please. You don't want me with you? Several of those men look capable of more than just talk, she said, every inch of her screaming that, however Uncle Jaime responded, she should go with him. Whoever had organized this bunch of gringos had riled them into an obvious religious fervor, as told by two more signs she noted. God hates gypsies and Jesus saves. No need for you to lead the train. Have the tent men ready, though, just in case. I've dealt with bigger mobs in my time. You know that. Mother Nurture nodded. Uncle Jaime walked with her through the door to the next compartment, where they separated. He jumped down to face the angry throng while she continued on through the train. She dropped in on one of the tent men first, waking their foreman, Reginald Knuckles Knucklin, and informing him of the situation. You want we should head out there now? Asked Knuckles. Not yet. Uncle Jaime said to stay alert, though. Just keep an ear open, okay? Yes, ma'am. Will do. First sign of trouble, and we'll tear through these roofs like locusts through chaff. Thanks, Knuckles. Anything for you and your uncle, ma'am. Knuckles clapped his hands around his mouth and hollered, Get up, boys! We got work to do! All around, on both sides of the sleeping car, groggy men woke and rummaged, bumped and grunted, fell and stumbled and floated from their bunks as Mother Nurture moved into the next car. She knocked on Peter and Marianne's door and was welcomed with, We're up, said Peter. Getting dressed now, called Marianne. The sound of tinkling metal, and Mother Nurture assumed it was the hooks grinding along the curtain rod that separated the twins' bunks. A second later, Peter opened the door, bags like silly putty stored below his dark eyes, shirtless, his torso covered in the ink that Marianne had tattooed on him over the years, giving both of them their preferred nicknames, Paper and Quill. I feel like hell's own bowel movement, Mother. You look the part, too. You two see the problem yet? Marianne's voice drifted from deeper within the cabin. Well, they don't look happy to see us is one thing. Another is, that's a lot of God bothering out there. I see Jaime is already soothsaying. That's just swell. We can only hope he soothes them, Mother Nurture said. Be prepared for a long haul if you can't talk them down. And a thin kitty if he does convince them to let us stay. Yeah, Marianne said. Looks like the whole damn town's out here. Why lease us a lot if you don't want us to be here? I'm sure we'll find out. Be ready, just in case. Say, Mother, said Peter. Yes? Do we have enough money to get to the next stop? You know, if he can't... Mother Nurture offered the man a weak smile. We'll talk about that when and if it comes to that. Peter laughed joyously. I was afraid you'd say that. Once everyone had been woken up and informed, Mother Nurture slipped back through the train, excusing herself past half-asleep, still drunk employees, until she exited into the tumult that had welcomed them. Now, We don't intend anything of the sort, Uncle Jaime was saying when she pulled up alongside him. He glanced her direction, and the frown on his face told her everything she needed to know about how things were going. Poorly, to say the least. I told you you gotta get gone, an old man in cleric's garb and collar bellowed back at Uncle Jaime. Yeah, yelled a thin man in a dirt-stained white shirt standing behind the cleric. We don't want your kind around here. We're only here to entertain, I assure you. Uncle Jaime was using his stage voice, calm but loud, cajoling, which meant he hadn't lost his temper. Should he lose it, well, Mother Nurture didn't want to think about what would happen if they were run out of town. Bunch of murdering thieves and rapists, a lot of them, cried someone from the middle of the crowd. We are no such kind, sir, Uncle Jaime protested. String 'em up, shouted yet another unseen individual. The throng sizzled and popped with shouted atrocities. Voices sounded from every direction, and Mother Nurture could nearly smell the imminent violence on the air. She leaned in and whispered a warning in Spanish to her uncle. Uncle Jaime nodded and began retreating from the crowd. A sign sailed through the air, up and over the mass of pressing bodies, and cracked into the side of the tent men's train car. In response, the tent men poured from inside, hustling down the stairs and off their car, heading for the crowd. Uncle Jaime caught Knuckles by the arm and pulled him close. Mother Nurture couldn't hear the exchange, but she hoped it was a plea for peace. Her uncle broke away from Knuckles, who'd raised a fist to the sky, halting his crew's forward progression. Uncle Jaime scooped Mother Nurture under one arm to lead her back to the train. We're leaving before this gets any worse, Uncle Jaime said. Tell everyone to stay away from the windows. He vanished into her train car on his way to his own, and she once more moved through the length of the car, running this time, shouting for everyone to stay clear of any and all glass. By the time she made it back to the tent men's car, the train was chugging forward, gaining momentum as signs and rocks and God knew what all else pelted the exterior walls. All 10 tent men were back inside, Knuckles included, but he had his back to her, tending to one of his men, a colored man with a bloody face. Is he all right? She asked as she drew close. Yeah, Hank will be fine. Some chump sucker punched him is all, said Knuckles. Should have let me clock the room, said the bleeding man, whom Mother Nurture could finally identify as Hank Prouse. Although he was a 20-year veteran of the circus, he'd only been with the Cortez family circus for 4 of those years. We're lucky that's all that happened, said Knuckles. Them bastards were like freshly chummed sharks. Knuckles had been a long-haul fisherman before joining their ranks, and many, if not all, of his metaphors, similes, and allegories related to that time in his life. We barely got out of that water before the feeding began, by God. You'll need something, Hank? A washcloth? She asked, her motherly nature racing to the forefront. No, man. I'll be all right. Hank grabbed 2 handfuls of his red shirt and wiped his face, smearing more blood than he removed. See? All better. I guess the throat works. Shut up, Derek. The tent men laughed in tandem. So did I. And Mother Nurture left them to their tales of how lucky all those rubes had been to get away with their limbs and lives. The boasting, braggartly nature of man, she thought, as she continued on, heading for her uncle's cabin. She had come out the other end of the greenhouse and was reaching for the door of her uncle's cabin when she heard something shatter inside and a stranger's voice holler, You filthy heathen! I'll show you! Mother Nurture threw the door open. Her eyes flickered between the elements of the scene. Her uncle on the floor, blood pouring from his left temple, a shattered vase and pieces all around him. The hand he was using to brace himself in a sitting position, clutching the flowers that had spilled forth from the destroyed vessel. The apoplectic man standing over her uncle with fire in his blue eyes, fists clenched and shaking with rage. The Lord will have his judgment, the man roared, dipping suddenly to grab Uncle Jaime by the collar of his shirt. The shirt didn't hold, tore plumb down the middle, and the resulting inertia sent the enraged man stumbling backward, and her uncle back down to the floor. Mother Nurture's eyes flashed from her uncle to the brute, to the open door at the rear of the caboose, and she reacted without hesitation, relying on his instability after the shirt had torn away in two, sending him staggering backward. She sprinted, rushing him, low and hard, and slammed shoulder first into his gut. He oofed when she connected, and flailed backward another few steps. She dug into the red carpet with the toes of her shoes, using her momentum to drive the big man back and out of the caboose. His back slammed into the metal handrail, the only thing that had kept both of them from sailing off onto the tracks in the train's wake, blessedly knocking the wind from the man. "You dirty whore!" he raged, his breath reeking of the tobacco she could see still stuck in his teeth. "Gotta pay to ride, gringo," she said, and kneed him between the legs. The apoplectic man doubled over and crumbled to his knees. Mother Nurture grabbed the open door frame with one hand and the handrail with the other and shoved a foot into the man's shoulder. She kicked with everything she had, sending the man spilling off the caboose and into the scrub alongside the tracks at 30 miles per hour. She gripped the handrail with both fists and watched with no small amount of glee as he tumbled ass over tea kettle through sand and tumbleweed and even a well-placed cactus until dust plumed and she lost sight of him entirely. Only then did she head inside to check on her uncle. Uncle Jaime was on his feet, patting at his oozing temple with one of his monographed handkerchiefs. His embossed initials could be seen on one dangling corner of the silk cloth. When he met her eyes, he smiled like a man ashamed to have lived through a natural disaster. This was one of those rare occasions when the two of them spoke in mostly English while out of earshot of everyone else. "Well done, but you should have let Knuckles handle him," chided Uncle Jaime. "And let that man kill you while I was fetching him? Don't be absurd, you silly man. You could have been hurt. And you were hurt, pendejo." She never cursed her uncle and had no idea how he would respond, but it was out in the water between them now, a fish off its hook, as Knuckles might have said. "I can handle myself, normally, but the coward caught me off guard. He hid behind my sofa until I sat down, and hit me with your mother's vase. I like that vase. You really should have let Knuckles have him. You know he would have killed you while I was going for help. You know that. Why not just thank me? And we can move on to more pressing issues." Uncle Jaime glanced at the bloodied handkerchief in his fist. "I'm bleeding like a stuck pig, and you wanted to discuss what now? Clean yourself up. I'll be in my car." "I asked you a question," he bellowed. Nonplussed at his outburst, she said, "I'll be in my cabin, trying to figure out how the hell we're going to reach Mobile, Alabama with zero money. Come see me when you stop bleeding." She was too angry for nurturing. Sometimes one must allow nature to take control, so she ignored her namesake and focused on variables she could control, her own worn nerves. Uncle Jaime would calm down, and then he would apologize, and she would nurse his wounds like the good niece she was, and the train would roll on until it could roll no more, because neither nature nor nurture fueled trains and fed people. You had to have money for that. Money she knew they didn't have. The voice is going, y'all, but I'm trying to truck on through, trying to roll on through. We're reading The Last Freak Show, Book 1, Flame and Fortune, out under my new pen name, S.E. Johnson. You can get a paperback or an ebook from Amazon directly, or you can buy a signed copy from me. If you're outside of the U.S., yes, even Canada or Mexico, please use the UK link, and I will refund any of the money from the shipping that I do not use. Hope you guys are doing all right. I'm enjoying reading, even if my voice is messing with me. So hopefully I can get through the next 30 minutes and we'll be good to go. Smooth. Lemon water. Here we go. 7. Mother Nuture, Uncle Jaime, and Knuckles, along with Peter and Marianne, were collected in Mother Nurture's cabin when the train began to slow at a considerable rate. Mother Nuture was the only one who had noticed everyone else was focused on the wrong thing. But how'd he get in? Peter asked. Through my rear door, I suppose, Uncle Jaime said. I must have left it unlocked. That's not like you, said Knuckles. He threaded his fingers together, flipped and extended them outward. His knuckles popped like kettle corn. One wonders just how he got his name. Uncle Jaime sighed at length. I know. I could have picked the lock. He could have picked the lock, I suppose. No way of telling now. All I can say is you need to be more careful. I ain't no boss of you, no lord of what you do, but your safety is my number one concern, Unc, Knuckles said with pride. And I thank you and your men for keeping the majority of those crazies off the train. How bad is the damage? Asked Uncle Jaime. Peter answered before Knuckles could. We have 4 windows shattered, gone completely, right out of their frames. Another dozen or so spiderwebbed, some with just a small crack here and there, but we're all right. Expensive fixes, but nothing that'll slow us down. Mother Nuture watched the world outside her window gain definition as the blur of scenery faded with their ever-decreasing speed. They had left the brown landscape of western Texas behind them for the greenery of eastern Texas and, now, Louisiana. She'd always loved the varying climates and geography of America. The United States had it all: tropical weather, desert wastelands, mountainous backdrops, frozen nothingness, and everything in between. Those with her would notice soon enough their lack of forward momentum. No need to mention the dwindling speed of the train when there was literally nothing any of them could do about it. How much you reckon we lose by getting run out of Mooseville? Asked Knuckles. Mother Nuture knew that Knuckles wasn't worried about his own paycheck. He was worried about his men. Knuckles was a fair but stern boss who treated his crew like human beings. Not all white foremen had this knack for kind leadership, especially when said crew was mostly people of color. Mother Nuture adored the man for that reason, among numerous others. Well, Uncle Jaime said, then paused, postponing the inevitable truth shining sadly in his eyes. We're in trouble, if I'm honest. After a moment's consideration, Knuckles asked, How bad? We're broke, said Marianne, who was known to help Mother Nuture with the books on occasion. We had to use the last of the petty cash for food and coal just to get to Mooseville. We're tapped, right, Mother? Mother Nuture nodded. You're awfully quiet, Uncle Jaime said. His tone was amiable, no challenge whatsoever in his voice. I don't have anything to say. Are you sure? Prodded Uncle Jaime. If I had something to say, I would say it. What I do have to say isn't going to help us, so I'm saving my breath. Knuckles moved to the picture window, stared for a moment in utter silence, then said, Are we slowing down? I believe we are, Uncle Jaime said, defeat graying his pallor. Where are we, you think? Asked Peter. Somewhere between Baton Rouge and Mobile would be my guess, said Knuckles. But I ain't no map man. I keep tents, not geography. Close enough, said Mother Nuture. We should head back to your cabin, see what Sandy is saying. Uncle Jaime agreed, and the group moved together out of Mother Nurture's cabin, through the greenhouse, and into the caboose. As soon as they stepped inside, Johnny Sandoval's worried voice could be heard through the flared end of the bronze communication tube. Ain't anybody listening to me? Shit, fire, and fart brimstone. Where the hell is... I'm here, Sandy, Uncle Jaime said into the horn. Thank Christ and all him angels. About gall darn time you answered me. I got no coal for the engine. Boiler pressure's dropping faster than my libido after a pump, boss. What do you want me to do? What's the nearest city? And will we make it? We couldn't make a mile if it were 20 feet at this point. Only reason we're moving at all is because I had her up to 40 for the steam drop. Could we use some pallets? Suggested Knuckles. Uncle Jaime shook his head. We used all the wood we could spare sending Chuko off. If we burn anything else, it would have to be critical building materials. And I, for one, will not jeopardize lives because of a single missing brace. Would you? You know I wouldn't, Unc, said Knuckles. What are y'all whispering for? Came Sandoval's robotic voice through the tube. We're working out if there's anything to burn to keep us going, said Marianne. Horrible, raucous laughter blasted from the brass horn. oh, Lordy, that's a good one right there. More laughter, while everyone in Uncle Jaime's car waited for Sandoval to continue. We could have burned every house between Washout and Mooseville and still would have come up 100 miles short. Wood ain't cold, kinfolk. Just don't burn the same. Burn a forest, get a few feet, is a joke we used to tell back in the day. Jesus Christ, Marianne said in a breathless whisper. We out of money, ain't we? Just be honest with old Sandy here, because the last long walking I did was in 1910, when I went to the store for tobacco and ended up joining this goddamn circus. Bet my old lady's still sitting on that porch, waiting for me to get back. Goddamn moron, never were good for nothing. Sandoval's laughter faded as he moved away from the end of his horn, marking the end of his side of the conversation. I think all I got left in me is one more subchapter, y'all. The throat ain't throating. Shut up, Derek. So much for throat go. I never would live up to that. All right. By the way, we're reading The Last Freak Show, Book 1, Flame and Fortune, by my new pen name, S.E. Johnson, out now. You can get a copy at Amazon. Link below. You can get a ebook or the paperback, or you can buy a signed paperback from me. Help support the channel in my habits, like nourishing my family. 8. After a short argument, where Uncle Jaime challenged Mother Nurture's bid to be the one to accompany Knuckles, Peter, and Sandoval on a trek to find the nearest town, which Mother Nurture won easily, seeing as how Uncle Jaime had a head wound and couldn't be depended on to think rationally, the group of 4 set out, one foot after the other, following the tracks wherever they might lead. Hang on, I think this is a pretty long subchapter. I might not make it through there. Oh, never mind. We got... Yeah, it's only 6 pages. We can do that. Trees, trees, and more trees, all green and thriving, lined either side of the tracks, and Mother Nurture could almost see the lay of the land as it had existed before man had come along with all his destructive power. Vast sections of nothing but unadulterated wilderness, seeding, growing, lightning-struck vegetation burning away to make room for new life, winter-stripped branches, skeletal and ominous, the circle of life, the fate of every wandering animal, predator, and prey. The passage of time like watching blood congeal on cold marble, exquisite and miraculous. She'd never been the religious type. To think that all of this, the lands, the sky, and seas of the world she inhabited, had been a happy accident, chaos in full effect, was a beauty she felt far surpassed the concept that some deity had created everything single-handedly, or multi-handedly, given the number of gods one believed in, or the amount of arms on any one given god, she supposed. The religions of the world could be right, because no one knew for certain what alien experiences awaited us post-mortem, if any afterlife existed at all. She had read every major religious text to date, and even a handful of the lesser-known manuscripts, and had found them all lacking, inconsistent, and if she were completely honest, wholly absurd. Take the Christian Bible, for example. Burning bushes, zealots swept away in chariots, the drowning of every living thing on earth except for a select few by a supposedly infallible entity who needed a do-over. Madness, she thought. Why would something omniscient ever need to correct a mistake? It made no sense. That was not to say that miracles and magic did not exist in this world, but their presence was subtle, hidden, known only to those who were still young enough at heart to see its oddities as the strength of its unique existence, and not judge those same rarities as flaws in some grand design. A grouping of deer, 2 does, a foal, and a 5-point buck stood just inside the tree line to the left, watching Mother Nurture and her 3 male companions walk along the tracks, each brown and white ear engaged and twitching, muscled haunches bunched in anticipation of the need to flee. Then Sandoval coughed, and the herd bolted through the thick mass of trees and out of view. "Sorry, shit," Sandoval growled after the deer. "Jumpy bastards." "Don't mind him, good dear brethren," Peter called into the trees. "He's just upset he's not drunk in a chair somewhere." "I'm upset I ain't nuts deep in your mother is what I am," Sandoval said. "Didn't realize you had a thing for dead women, Sandy," Peter shot back. "Every hole's a home if you try hard enough, Paper." "Stop it," Mother Nurture said in a tone that brooked no argument. "We have no idea how long we're going to be walking, and I, for one, do not want to spend this journey listening to you debate who can piss farther than the other." "Me neither," mumbled Knuckles. The big man's attention was focused intently on the tracks under his feet. Mother Nurture noticed. Each step calculated to land perfectly center of each wooden cross tie, as if a vast chasm lay below, threatening to swallow him whole should his step falter so much as a centimeter. "Ah, we're just joshing old Paper here. Right, Paper?" "You were being a jerk, is what I think," said Paper. "Only jerk I do is with your mother." "You two shut up," Knuckles hollered, both feet on one cross tie, shoulder length apart. "If I hear one more word about Paper's mother, Sandy, I'm gonna tuck your head up your ass and use you as a fishing lure. You got that?" Yeah, I got it, Knuckles. I got you, shit." Sandoval waved Knuckles off dismissively, but said nothing more about coitus with Peter's beloved mother, rest her soul. "Thank you," Mother Nurture whispered to Knuckles. Knuckles nodded back and got walking again. A half-mile later, Sandoval broke the silence with, "You ever wonder what it'd be like if, say, I don't know, we didn't have to struggle so goddamn much?" "Quit complaining, Sandy," Mother Nurture said. "It's not going to make this walk any easier, or shorter for that matter, so just hush." "Why can't I talk?" Sandoval said incredulously. "I don't see no reason I can't flap my jaw all I like, seeing as how none of you geeks are saying a gall darn thing." "Maybe we just appreciate peace and quiet when we can get it," Peter said, his eyes down, watching where each foot landed. Mother Nurture had noticed Peter had started this once he saw Knuckles doing the same. The change was likely completely subconscious on Peter's part, but that didn't make it any less interesting to her. Sandoval grunted. "What's there to appreciate about peace and quiet? That's just gall darn annoying, you ask me. Nothing but your old dad burn thoughts jostling around in your brain bucket like coins in a tin cup." "You're the only annoying thing out here, Sandy," said Peter. "Paper," Mother Nurture warned. "Sorry, Mother." Sandoval stopped, his left foot landing between 2 ties. Knuckles noticed the placement of Sandoval's foot, and the fear sprang to his eyes. She wondered what was going on in that big head of his. She imagined gerbils in a wheel, racing for their lives, the gears smoking and sparking as their little legs kicked and kicked and kicked. "Move your foot," Knuckles said. "Why?" Sandoval glanced down at his foot, saw nothing concerning, and looked back up. "What's wrong with my foot?" "It's bad luck stepping between the ties," Knuckles said, as if this were common knowledge, and Sandoval was the biggest idiot alive for not realizing it. "Says who?" said Sandoval. "Says me, you dunce. Move your foot." Knuckles lurched forward, palms out, and shoved the conductor off the tracks. Sandoval hollered like a tomcat with his dangles in a bear trap as he dropped. He hit the gravel slope that ran up to meet the track and rolled bouncingly, finally coming to an abrupt stop at the bottom of a shallow ditch. "Jesus, Knucklin'," Peter said, chuckling. "Son of a bitch," Sandoval bellowed. Gravel crunched as the man struggled to his feet. A long scratch ran from shoulder to elbow of one arm, trickling blood. Sandoval dusted his pants off, wiped his palms on his wife beater, and marched upward, every footfall a loose thing threatening to spill him back to where he'd started. "Why the hell you do that?" he screeched up at Knuckles. "You'll be all right, Duck," Knuckles said, knowing how much Sandoval hated his lesser-used nickname. Sandoval grabbed and thrust his crotch at Knuckles. "I got your duck, you motherless bastard." "Are you okay, Sandy?" asked Mother Nurture. "Let me see that wound." "You need to be worried about your tent man over there," he grumbled as he offered her his arm for inspection. She studied the wound, a thin, leaking slash akin to a paper cut, if a mite deeper. "You'll be okay." He snatched his arm away. "I know I'll be fine, goddammit. Stop treating me like a gall darn woman." Mother Nurture dug her fists into her flanks, cocked a hip, and glared at the conductor. "Exactly how am I treating you like a woman?" "Don't give me none of your woman's lib, bullpucky. Y'all folks lost or something." An old man stood at the tree line, on the right side of the tracks, with a hunting rifle slung over one shoulder. His toothless mouth a thin, twitching line separating his scrunched nose and chin, both of which were almost touching. He wore a raggedy red and black flannel shirt tucked into a pair of jeans with threadbare knees and black suspenders. His boots were the worst for wear, though. Maybe 6 stitches total held each sole to their respective leathers. "About as lost as possible, yes, sir," said Mother Nurture. She skidded down the gravel and approached the man with her hand extended in greeting. He stared at her hand, then looked past her, to the 3 men back on the tracks, said, "I asked y'all a question." Mother Nurture frowned. "And your filly here doesn't know her place, I take it." He called up to the men. Mother Nurture's outstretched hand curled into a fist and dropped to her side, nails digging into her palm. She cleared her throat, drawing the man's eyes back to her. "These are my men. They work for me." "That's so," the old-timer said. "Yes, sir," Knuckles said, staying where he was. The tent man knew better than to intervene, to allow her the respect she deserved. Either she would handle this guy, or they would move along. She could only hope that the rifle in the old man's possession didn't come into play here. "What kind of men let a woman order 'em around?" "The smart kind," Mother Nurture said. "Nice meeting you, but I think we'll be on our way." Probably should. The old man's voice trailed off. "Just know you got about 20 miles to the next patch of civilization. And them fellers what run Greenbolt, that's the nearest town, you see. They don't cotton to them's what's dark as you, girl." "Noted. Thank you for the information." Mother Nurture climbed back to the tracks. "You got 20 miles in you?" she asked Sandoval. "I got whatever I need to have, I reckon," was Sandoval's reply. "Paper?" "Like Sandy said, I guess I don't have any other choice, but my dogs are already barking." "They're gonna be howling for y'all get anywhere near Greenbolt," the old-timer said in his screechy, aged way. "I got me a truck you could pay me to drive y'all with, but I don't do business with no women, nor no Negroes. Although she ain't that dark, by gum. Still, she's dark enough, I suppose. You want to ride? That big old buck of yourn up there'll be paying." The muscles in Knuckles' forearms bulged and rolled. Mother Nurture laid a hand on his clenched fist, and he relaxed a bit. "Thanks for the offer, but no need. We'll hoof it," said Mother Nurture. "Gonna need hoofs." He leaned well into the F, which was a miracle, considering he didn't have any teeth in his head, "to get that far, but maybe a 20-mile hike will wear out some of that sass in you, little girl. Good luck, and watch out for snakes. Water up ahead breeds them quicker than tar babies." With that, the old-timer turned and threaded through the trees until they lost sight of him. "Folks like him get my dander up," Knuckles said. Proof of such radiated off him, heat from a sizzling griddle. "Don't waste your energy being angry with people who can't see it," she said, watching the tree line, just in case the old-timer reappeared. She fully expected him to return with a whole, shall we say, clan of folks as pale as him, but he never did. Just a chance occurrence on a long walk, she thought, but couldn't convince even herself of such. "Come on. If that old coot is right, we got a hell of a walk ahead of us." "Should have brought my goddamn right gut. God damn it," Sandoval said as the group once again got walking. Ew. All right. I think I'm done for tonight. Sorry to have to cut it off. But my throat is raw. Shut up, Derek. We were reading from the last Freak Show, Book 1, Flame and Fortune, by my new pen name, S.E. Johnson. You can buy the book at the links down there in the doobly-doo, the description. It's on Amazon. You can get a paperback or an ebook. You can also buy a signed copy directly from me. If you are outside of the U.S., even Canada and Mexico, please use the UK link, and I will refund you any of the shipping that I do not use. Sorry, Derek. Yeah, I can't. The voice ain't letting me. I'm almost done. So tomato, motherfucker throwing tomatoes at me. Anyways, I might be back before next Wednesday, but until then, I hope you guys are enjoying this. And I just, hoping for the best for this book. So if you can help me out by grabbing a copy and giving me a review, I desperately need reviews. Anyways, if you would, I'd appreciate it. If not, no harm, no foul. Derek, Solvents, Lazy, all y'all, I hope you have a great night. I am going to go drink some hot tea and wait for my kid to get off so I can go pick them up. But anyways, until next time, I have been E, you have been you. This has been the last Freak Show, Book 1, Flame and Fortune, that you can buy down there in the links. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye. Night, Lazy. Whoopity doopity scoopity.